She was alone on the last bus home when a billionaire saw the same pendant he had given his lost daughter, and he froze. The fluorescent lights of the Meridian Financial building cast harsh shadows across the empty corridors as Emily Parker pushed her cleaning cart down the marble hallway. Her sneakers squeaked softly against the polished floor, the only sound breaking the 2 a.m. silence. She'd been working these night shifts for 8 months now, and the routine had become as familiar as breathing, but it never got easier. Her fingers found the small golden butterfly pendant hanging from her neck, a nervous habit she'd developed over the years. The delicate piece of jewelry caught the overhead light, its tiny wings seeming to flutter as she moved. It was her only treasure, the one beautiful thing in a life that had been anything but. Another night, another dollar, she whispered to herself. Though the dollar part was more hope than reality, the cleaning company paid minimum wage, and after taxes, bus fare, and Grace's medical bills, there wasn't much left over. But Emily Parker had learned long ago that complaining wouldn't change anything. Only action would. She methodically cleaned each office, her movements efficient and practiced. The executives who worked in these glass-walled spaces made more in a day than she did in 6 months. But Emily tried not to think about that. Resentment was a luxury she couldn't afford. Grace needed her medication, and the oncology bills weren't going to pay themselves. By 5:30 a.m., Emily was finally done. She gathered her supplies, clocked out, and headed for the bus stop. The pre-dawn air was crisp, carrying the promise of another scorching July day in the city. The early morning commuters were just starting to emerge. Joggers, dog walkers, the occasional taxi carrying someone important to somewhere important. The number 47 bus wheezed to a stop in front of her, its doors opening with a hydraulic sigh. Emily climbed aboard, dropping her quarters into the fare box with the practiced motion of someone who'd made this journey countless times. The bus was nearly empty at this hour, just a few hospital workers ending their shifts and maintenance crews heading home. She claimed her usual seat halfway back, settling against the worn vinyl with a tired exhale. Her fingers automatically found the butterfly pendant again, thumb tracing its smooth surface. Grace had given it to her for her 16th birthday, claiming it had been her mother's. "Butterflies represent transformation," Grace had said, her weathered hands gentle as she fastened the chain around Emily's neck. "No matter how dark things get, remember that beautiful things can emerge from the hardest times." 6 years later, Emily was still waiting for her transformation. 15 blocks away, William Harrison stood in the emergency room of Metropolitan General Hospital, his usually perfect appearance disheveled. His driver, Roberto, lay unconscious on a gurney, machines beeping steadily around him. The doctors said it had been a massive heart attack. Sudden, devastating, but not necessarily fatal if they could stabilize him quickly. "Mr. Harrison," a young doctor approached, his scrubs wrinkled from a long night. "We're taking him up to surgery now. The next few hours will be critical, but his vital signs are improving." William nodded, running a hand through his graying hair. Roberto had been with him for 12 years, more friend than employee. The man had a wife, 3 kids, grandchildren on the way. William would make sure they were taken care of, regardless of the outcome. "Sir," a nurse touched his arm gently, "there's nothing more you can do here tonight. The surgery will take several hours. Perhaps you should go home, get some rest." Home? The word felt empty. The penthouse apartment, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and designer furniture, was just a place he slept. It hadn't been a home since Lily. "I need to get back," he said finally. The board meeting was at 9, and there were contracts to review, decisions to make. The hotel empire didn't run itself, though sometimes William wondered why he bothered. Success felt hollow when you had no one to share it with. He stepped outside, expecting to see his backup driver waiting with the second car, but the street was empty except for a city bus idling at the nearby stop. William checked his phone. No messages, no missed calls. In the chaos of the evening, he'd forgotten to arrange alternative transportation. A businessman of his stature could easily call a taxi, of course, or summon a car service with a few taps on his phone. But something made him hesitate. When was the last time he'd been among regular people? When had he last seen the city from anywhere but behind tinted windows? Almost without thinking, William found himself walking toward the bus stop. The driver looked surprised as this well-dressed man in a $1,000 suit climbed aboard, but said nothing. William dropped some bills into the fare box. Too much, but he wasn't sure of the exact amount, and looked around for a seat. The bus was nearly empty, a few tired-looking people scattered throughout, most dozing or staring out windows, and there, halfway back, sat a young woman who immediately caught his attention. She was probably in her early 20s, with light brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and clothes that had seen better days. But it wasn't her appearance that made William's breath catch. It was what she was holding. Her fingers were wrapped around a small pendant at her throat, and even in the dim bus lighting, William could see its distinctive shape, a butterfly, golden, delicate, with tiny engravings along the wings that were barely visible unless you knew exactly what to look for. The bus lurched forward, but William barely noticed. His legs felt weak, his heart hammering against his ribs. It couldn't be. It was impossible. He'd had that pendant made by a specialty jeweler in Manhattan 19 years ago, a one-of-a-kind piece for his daughter's 3rd birthday. The artisan had assured him it was unique, the only one like it in existence. But there it was. Hanging from the neck of a stranger on a city bus at dawn, William's mind raced back to that terrible night. Lily, barely 3 years old, snatched from their estate's garden while Margaret was inside taking a phone call. The ransom demands, the FBI investigation, the trail that went cold, the months of searching, the private investigators, the sleepless nights, the slow dissolution of his marriage as grief ate away at everything they'd built together. Margaret's suicide 3 years later, unable to bear the weight of losing their only child, had nearly destroyed him completely. Only his obsessive search for Lily had kept him going, pouring millions into investigations that led nowhere, chasing leads that evaporated like morning mist. And now, 19 years later, here was the pendant. The butterfly he'd commissioned as a symbol of his little girl's potential to soar, to transform the world with her laughter and joy. The young woman looked up suddenly, perhaps sensing his stare, and their eyes met for just a moment. William saw exhaustion there, worry, but also a kind of quiet strength that reminded him of someone. The curve of her jaw, the set of her shoulders. "West Side Avenue," the driver called out, and the young woman stood, releasing her grip on the pendant. William watched as she moved toward the front of the bus, his heart pounding so hard he was sure other passengers could hear it. This was insane. Pendant or no pendant, this couldn't be his daughter. Lily was dead. She had to be after 19 years, after all the searches, all the dead ends. But as the bus slowed to a stop, William found himself standing too. He followed at a distance as the young woman stepped onto the sidewalk, watched as she began walking down a street he recognized with a chill of memory. This was the neighborhood where the last credible sighting had occurred. 2 decades ago, where a convenience store clerk thought he'd seen a small girl with dark-haired men who seemed nervous, agitated, where the trail had gone permanently cold. William stood at the bus stop long after the vehicle had pulled away, watching the young woman's figure disappear into the maze of narrow streets and run-down buildings. His hands were shaking as he pulled out his phone. "Mitchell, it's William Harrison. I need you to drop everything and meet me downtown." "Yes, I know what time it is." "And Mitchell, bring your best people. All of them, I think. I think I might have found her." The call ended, but William remained motionless on the empty street corner, staring in the direction the young woman had gone. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, and the first rays of sunlight began to creep over the city's skyline. After 19 years of darkness, a butterfly had finally shown him the way home. Mitchell Andrews had worked for William Harrison for over a decade, handling the kind of investigations that required discretion and resources most people couldn't access. But he'd never seen his employer look quite like this, disheveled, exhausted, yet crackling with an energy that bordered on manic. "You're absolutely certain about what you saw?" Mitchell asked for the 3rd time, his pen poised over his notepad. They sat in William's downtown office, the morning sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city. "The pendant was identical, Mitchell. Not similar. Identical." William's voice carried a conviction that made the veteran investigator lean forward. "I had it custom-made by Steinberg and Associates in Manhattan. They have the original sketches, the specifications. There's no way this is a coincidence." Mitchell nodded slowly. He'd been part of the original search for Lily Harrison, had watched this man pour his fortune and sanity into finding his daughter. In all those years, they'd never had a lead this concrete. "What do we know about her?" William continued, his fingers drumming against the mahogany desk. "Where does she live? What's her name? How did she get the pendant?" "Give me 48 hours, Mitchell said, closing his notebook. "My team will find everything there is to know about this young woman, but William," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that this isn't what we think it is. There could be explanations we haven't considered." William's jaw tightened. "There's only one explanation that matters, Mitchell. Find her." 3 miles away, in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment above a laundromat, Emily Parker was dealing with her own crisis. Grace sat propped up in her worn recliner, her face pale and drawn, while Emily knelt beside her with a pill organizer. "The morning medications, Grace. You know Dr. Rodriguez said consistency is crucial." Emily's voice carried the patient tone of someone who'd had this conversation many times before. Grace's weathered hand trembled slightly as she reached for the water glass. At 73, she'd raised Emily since the girl was barely more than a toddler, and the cancer diagnosis 6 months ago had shaken them both to their core. "I saw Mrs. Chen from upstairs watching through her peephole yesterday," Grace said quietly, her eyes distant. "And there was a man in a suit asking questions at the corner market. Luis said he was asking about you." Emily frowned, setting down the pill organizer. "What kind of questions?" "Your schedule, where you work, how long we've lived here." Grace's voice carried a worry that made Emily's stomach clench. "Baby girl, there's things about our past. Things I've never told you because I thought they were buried forever." Before Emily could respond, Grace's expression shifted, her eyes growing wide with something that looked like fear. "Maybe they're not as buried as I hoped." Emily followed her gaze to the window that faced the street. A black sedan was parked across from their building, its windows tinted dark. As they watched, a man in an expensive suit emerged from the building next door, speaking into a phone. "Grace, you're scaring me." Emily moved to the window, careful to stay behind the curtain. "Who would be asking questions about us? We don't have any enemies. We barely have any friends." Grace was quiet for a long moment, her fingers working at the fabric of her house dress. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Emily, honey, do you remember anything from before you came to live with me? Anything at all?" The question hit Emily like a physical blow. She'd asked this same question countless times over the years, desperate to understand the blank space where her earliest memories should be. Grace had always given the same answer, that trauma could do that to a young mind, that some things were better left forgotten. "You know I don't," Emily said, turning back to her grandmother. "I was 3. You've always said my parents died in a car accident, that you were my only living relative." "I know what I said." Grace's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "But sometimes the truth we tell isn't the same as the truth that is." A knock at the door interrupted them. Sharp and authoritative, Emily felt her heart rate spike as she and Grace exchanged glances. "Miss Parker, my name is Detective Rodriguez. I'd like to ask you a few questions." Emily's mind raced. Detective Rodriguez, the same name as Grace's oncologist, but surely a coincidence. She approached the door cautiously, checking the peephole. A middle-aged Hispanic man in a rumpled suit stood in the hallway, his badge visible in his hand. "Questions about what?" Emily called through the door. "It's regarding some recent inquiries into your background. There's been some unusual activity. People asking questions, running checks. We want to make sure you're not in any kind of trouble." Grace was shaking her head frantically from across the room, her face pale as parchment. "Don't," she mouthed silently. "Please don't open that door." Emily's hand hovered over the deadbolt. Something felt wrong about this, but she couldn't put her finger on what. The detective seemed legitimate enough, and if someone was really investigating them, maybe the police could help. "I'm going to need to see some identification," Emily said finally. "Slide it under the door." There was a moment of silence, then the sound of paper rustling. A police ID slid under the gap, and Emily picked it up. Studying it carefully, it looked real enough, but then again, she wasn't an expert on fake documents. "Miss Parker, I understand your caution, but we really do need to talk. There are some things about your past that you might not be aware of, some connections that could put you in danger." "What kind of connections?" Emily's voice cracked slightly. "The kind that involve very wealthy Very powerful people who've been looking for something for a very long time. Something they think you might have. Emily's hand instinctively went to her throat, fingers closing around the butterfly pendant. Grace's reaction was immediate and visceral. She half rose from her chair, one hand pressed to her chest as if she was having trouble breathing. "Emily," Grace gasped. "Come away from the door now." But Emily was frozen, caught between her grandmother's fear and her own desperate need for answers about the empty spaces in her memory. "What am I supposed to have?" she called through the door. "I don't own anything valuable. I work nights cleaning office buildings. I can barely afford Grace's medication. Sometimes the most valuable things don't look like much to the people who have them," the detective replied. "A piece of jewelry, perhaps. Something that might seem like a simple keepsake, but actually represents much more." Emily's blood turned to ice. She looked down at the pendant in her palm, the golden butterfly that had been her most treasured possession for as long as she could remember. Grace had given it to her, said it had belonged to her mother. "Grace," Emily whispered, turning back to her grandmother. "Grace, what did you never tell me?" But Grace's chair was empty. Emily heard the back door slam shut, followed by the sound of hurried footsteps on the fire escape. Through the kitchen window, she could see her grandmother's slight figure moving with surprising speed down the alley behind their building. "Miss Parker," the detective's voice was more urgent now. "I think we really need to talk." Emily backed away from the door, her mind reeling. Grace's sudden flight, the questions about the pendant, the mysterious investigators who'd apparently been tracking her movements. It all felt like pieces of a puzzle she didn't know she'd been solving her entire life. She grabbed her jacket and purse, then climbed out the kitchen window onto the fire escape. If Grace was running, there had to be a reason. And after 19 years of trust between them, Emily wasn't about to abandon the woman who'd raised her now. As she descended the metal steps, Emily could hear the detective calling her name, could see the black sedan starting its engine, but she also saw something else. Grace's familiar figure disappearing around the corner of 5th Street, moving toward the old church where she'd taught Emily to pray when she was little. Whatever secrets Grace had been keeping, whatever truth had been buried all these years, Emily was about to discover that some things stayed hidden only until the right person started looking for them, and someone very powerful had finally started looking. Emily found Grace in the basement of St. Michael's Catholic Church, sitting in the same wooden pew where she'd brought Emily to pray during her childhood nightmares. The elderly woman's shoulders shook with silent sobs. Her weathered hands clutched around a rosary that had belonged to her own mother decades ago. "Grace," Emily's voice echoed softly in the empty sanctuary. "What's happening? Why did you run?" Grace looked up, her eyes red-rimmed and filled with a pain Emily had never seen before. "I always knew this day would come," she whispered. "I just prayed it would be after I was gone. So you'd never have to know." Emily slid into the pew beside her, the familiar scent of incense and old wood providing little comfort. "Know what, Grace? You're scaring me. Those people asking questions? That detective at our door? What do they want with us?" For a long moment, Grace said nothing, her fingers working over the worn beads of her rosary. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "Emily, honey, I need you to listen to me very carefully, and I need you to try not to hate me for what I'm about to tell you." Emily's heart began racing. "I could never hate you. You raised me. You're all the family I have. That's just it, baby girl." Grace turned to face her, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm not your family. I'm not your grandmother. I'm not even related to you." The words hit Emily like a physical blow. She felt the air leave her lungs, felt the familiar sanctuary spinning around her. "What are you talking about? Of course you're my grandmother. You've always been my grandmother." Grace shook her head slowly. 19 years ago, on a night I'll never forget as long as I live, I found a little girl wandering the streets 3 blocks from where we live now. She was maybe 3 years old, dirty, hungry, terrified out of her mind. She kept asking for her mama and daddy, but she was so traumatized she could barely speak. Emily's hands were shaking now. "That little girl. You're talking about me. The police were looking for her. I heard it on the radio, saw the missing child reports on TV. But honey, these weren't regular police looking to help a lost baby find her way home. There were men in expensive cars, men who looked like trouble, men who were asking the wrong kinds of questions." Grace paused, wiping her eyes with a tissue from her purse. The weight of 19 years of secrets seemed to be crushing her. I worked at the free clinic back then, and I'd seen what happened to children who got caught up in bad situations. I knew that little girl, you, weren't safe, so I made a choice that's haunted me every day since. What choice? Emily's voice was barely a whisper. I took you home. I cleaned you up, fed you, let you sleep in my bed until the nightmares stopped. And when it became clear that the men looking for you weren't the kind who'd keep you safe, I made you disappear. Emily stood abruptly, pacing to the altar and back. What do you mean, made me disappear? I had a friend who worked at the county records office. Maria owed me a favor from when I helped her daughter through a difficult pregnancy. She helped me create new documents, a birth certificate, medical records, everything needed to make Emily Parker exist on paper. Emily Parker isn't even my real name. The question came out as a strangled cry. Grace's voice broke completely. I'm so sorry, honey. I named you after my own daughter. The baby I lost when she was just 6 months old, I thought. I thought if I could save you, maybe it would make up for not being able to save her. Emily felt like the ground was crumbling beneath her feet. Everything she thought she knew about herself, every memory, every story, Grace had told her about her parents, about their family history, all lies. Who am I really? She asked, her voice hollow. What's my real name? I don't know, Grace admitted. You were so young, so scared, you kept saying Lily at first, but I thought maybe that was an imaginary friend or a doll you'd lost. After a few months, you stopped talking about your old life entirely. The doctors said that was normal, that children sometimes block out trauma to protect themselves. Emily sank back into the pew, her mind reeling. The pendant? She said suddenly, her hand going to her throat. You said it was my mother's. Grace nodded slowly. It was the only thing you had with you that night. You were clutching it so tight we could barely get it out of your hand. I knew it had to be important, so I kept it safe for you. When you were old enough to wear jewelry, I gave it back. All these years, Emily said, her voice growing stronger with anger. All these years you let me believe I was orphaned in a car accident. You let me grieve for parents who might still be alive. You let me think I had no one in the world except you. I was trying to protect you. Grace's voice rose, echoing off the stone walls. Those men, Emily, they were dangerous. I could see it in their eyes, hear it in the questions they were asking. They weren't looking for a lost child to return to loving parents. They were looking for something else entirely. So you stole me. The words tasted bitter in Emily's mouth. You kidnapped me and made up a whole life. I saved you, Grace said firmly, some of her old strength returning. Whatever situation you came from, whoever was looking for you, it wasn't safe. I gave you a chance to grow up, to become the strong, beautiful woman you are today. Emily was quiet for several minutes, processing everything she'd learned. The silence in the church was broken only by the distant sound of traffic and Grace's quiet weeping. The people asking questions now, Emily said finally. They're connected to my past, aren't they? To whoever I really am. Grace nodded. I think your real family finally found you. Or maybe the bad people did. I don't know which. And that terrifies me. How can you not know the difference? Because sometimes, Grace said sadly, the people who claim to love us are the ones who hurt us most. I've seen it too many times, honey. Rich families who cover up abuse. Powerful people who think children are possessions instead of human beings. Emily thought about the detective at their door, about his questions regarding the pendant, about the black sedan that had been watching their building. What am I supposed to do now? I can't just pretend I never learned this. I know, Grace said, reaching for Emily's hand. And I know you probably hate me right now, and you have every right to. But Emily, please, be careful who you trust. Just because someone claims to be your family doesn't mean they have your best interests at heart. Emily looked down at their joined hands. Grace's weathered and spotted with age. Her own young and strong, but shaking with emotion. Despite everything, despite the lies and the secrets and the complete upheaval of everything she thought she knew about herself, she couldn't deny the love she felt for this woman who had raised her. I don't hate you, she said quietly. I'm angry, and I'm scared, and I feel like my whole life has been turned upside down, but I don't hate you. Grace squeezed her hand tightly. Whatever happens next, whatever you decide to do, Just remember that every choice I made was out of love. Maybe not the right choices, maybe not the smart choices, but they came from love." Emily nodded, though her heart was still breaking. As they sat together in the quiet sanctuary, she realized that her search for the truth about her identity was just beginning, and she had no idea whether the answers she found would set her free or destroy everything she had left. Outside, the black sedan waited patiently at the curb, its occupants watching the church entrance with the patience of people who had been searching for something precious for a very long time. Emily and Grace sat in silence for another 20 minutes before the sound of footsteps echoed through the church. Emily tensed, expecting to see the detective from their apartment, but instead, a well-dressed man in his 50s appeared at the end of their pew. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his suit expensive, but his eyes held a vulnerability that seemed at odds with his polished appearance. "Excuse me," he said softly, his voice trembling slightly. "Are you Emily Parker?" Emily instinctively moved closer to Grace, her hand going to the butterfly pendant at her throat. "Who's asking?" The man's eyes locked onto the pendant, and Emily watched as his face went completely white. He gripped the back of the pew in front of them, his knuckles turning pale. "My God," he whispered. "It really is you." "Sir, I think you have the wrong person," Grace said, her voice sharp with protective instinct. "We'd like you to leave us alone." But the man wasn't listening to Grace. His entire focus was on Emily, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "You have your mother's eyes," he said. "Margaret's eyes. I should have seen it immediately on the bus, but I was so shocked by the pendant." "The bus." Emily's heart began racing. "You were on the bus this morning." William nodded, pulling out his phone with shaking hands. He scrolled through several photos before stopping on one that made Emily's breath catch. It was a picture of her pendant, or one identical to it, sitting in what looked like a jewelry box lined with black velvet. "I had this made 19 years ago," William said, his voice barely controlled, "by a specialty jeweler in Manhattan. It was for my daughter's 3rd birthday. She was taken from us that same week." Grace's grip on Emily's hand tightened painfully, but Emily barely noticed. She was staring at the photo, then at the man's face, looking for something that felt familiar, some spark of recognition. "What was your daughter's name?" she asked quietly. "Lily." The name came out like a prayer. Lily Margaret Harrison. Emily felt the world tilt around her. Lily, the name Grace had said she'd repeated as a traumatized child, the name they'd both assumed belonged to an imaginary friend or lost toy. "You think I'm your daughter?" Emily said, and it wasn't a question. "I don't think it," William said, moving closer. "I know it. I've spent 19 years looking for you, Lily. 19 years and millions of dollars in private investigators, FBI consultants, psychics, anyone who might help me find you. And here you are, 3 miles from where you disappeared, wearing the pendant I commissioned for you. Her name is Emily," Grace said fiercely. "Emily Parker. I raised her. I've been her family for 19 years. William's expression hardened as he looked at Grace. "You've been her kidnapper for 19 years. I saved her." Grace stood, her frail frame shaking with indignation. "When I found her, she was terrified, starving, traumatized beyond anything a child should endure. Where were you then? Where was this loving father when his 3-year-old daughter was wandering the streets alone?" "She was taken from our estate," William said, his voice rising. "Kidnapped by professionals who knew exactly what they were doing. We paid ransom. We cooperated with every demand, but they said she was dead. They said my little girl was dead." Emily watched this exchange between the two people claiming to know what was best for her, feeling increasingly disconnected from her own life. "Stop," she said quietly, then louder. "Stop." Both William and Grace turned to look at her, and Emily saw the desperation in both their faces. Different kinds of desperation, but equally intense. "If what you're saying is true," Emily said to William, "if I really am your daughter, then where have you been for the last 19 years? Because I've been right here. I've been 3 miles from where I supposedly disappeared, going to school, working jobs, taking care of Grace when she got sick. If you've been looking so hard, how did you miss me?" William's face crumpled. "I don't know, God help me. I don't know. We searched this area dozens of times in the early years. We had your picture on every missing child website, offered rewards that should have brought you home, maybe because I wasn't missing, Emily said, her voice growing stronger with anger. Maybe because I was exactly where I needed to be, with someone who actually took care of me instead of losing me in the first place. The words hit William like physical blows. Lily, please, you don't understand what happened that night. My name is Emily, she shouted, standing abruptly. I don't care what you say my name used to be. I don't remember being Lily. I don't remember you, or your estate, or being kidnapped, or any of it. All I remember is Grace taking care of me when I was sick, working 2 jobs to keep food on our table, sitting up with me during nightmares, teaching me right from wrong. But you are my daughter, William said desperately. The DNA will prove it. We can do the test today, and then you'll see. And then what? Emily's voice was raw with emotion. Then I'm supposed to what, exactly, come live in your mansion? Pretend the last 19 years didn't happen? Abandon the woman who raised me for some stranger who claims to be my father? I am your father. You're a man with money who lost track of his property 19 years ago. Emily shot back. That's not the same thing. William staggered as if she'd hit him. Property, Lily. You were everything to us. Everything. When you disappeared, your mother, Margaret, couldn't handle it. She took her own life 3 years later because she couldn't live without you. The information hit Emily like a cold wave, but she fought against the sympathy trying to rise in her chest. Then maybe you should have looked harder. Maybe you should have knocked on more doors, searched more neighborhoods, done something other than throwing money at private investigators. We did everything. You did everything wrong. Emily's voice echoed off the stone walls. Because if you'd done everything right, I wouldn't have spent 19 years thinking I was an orphan. I wouldn't have grown up poor, worrying about money for Grace's medication, working night shifts to pay rent on a crummy apartment. That ends now, William said firmly. You don't ever have to worry about money again. I'll take care of everything. Grace's medical bills, a new place to live, whatever you need. I don't want your charity, Emily said coldly. It's not charity. You're my daughter. It's my responsibility. Your responsibility was 19 years ago, and you failed at it. William's composure finally broke completely. He sank into the pew behind him, his face in his hands, shoulders shaking with grief. I've looked for you every single day, he whispered. Every morning I wake up, and the first thing I think about is finding you. I've never stopped hoping, never stopped believing you were alive somewhere. Despite herself, Emily felt a crack in her armor of anger, but Grace's hand on her arm reminded her of everything she'd learned today, everything that had been turned upside down. Come on, Grace said gently. Let's go home. This isn't over. William called after them as they walked toward the exit. Lily, please, just give me a chance to explain everything. Let me show you the life you should have had. Emily paused at the church door, not turning around. The life I should have had was with parents who didn't lose me in the first place, she said quietly. And my name is Emily. As they stepped outside, Emily noticed a young man leaning against a car across the street. He was perhaps 30, with kind eyes and an expression of patient understanding. When he saw them emerge, he pushed off from the car and walked over. Excuse me, he said gently. Are you Emily Parker? My name is Matthew Collins. I work with the Missing Children Foundation, and I think we might need to talk. Matthew Collins had the kind of face that immediately put people at ease. Gentle brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, an easy smile, and an aura of competence mixed with genuine compassion. But as Emily studied him across the small table at Rosie's diner, she could see something deeper in his expression, a pain that mirrored her own. I know this is overwhelming, Matthew said, stirring sugar into his coffee with slow, deliberate movements. Finding out your entire identity isn't what you thought it was. It's like having the ground pulled out from under you. Emily glanced at Grace, who sat rigidly beside her, clearly uncomfortable with sharing their story with yet another stranger. How do you know what that feels like? Because it happened to me too. Matthew's voice was quiet, matter of fact. When I was 15, I found out my younger sister hadn't died in an accident like my parents told me. She'd been taken, sold, actually, to people who shouldn't have had access to children. Grace's coffee cup rattled against the saucer as she set it down. Did you find her? Matthew shook his head. his jaw tightening. By the time I learned the truth, it was too late. But that's when I decided to dedicate my life to helping other families. The Missing Children Foundation has reunited over 200 families in the past 8 years. And you think I'm one of those children, Emily said. I know you are. Matthew pulled out a tablet, swiping through several documents. Emily, what I'm about to show you might be difficult to process, but I need you to see the full picture of what happened 19 years ago. He turned the screen toward her, revealing a newspaper clipping from 1994. The headline read, "Hotel Magnate's Daughter Kidnapped from Family Estate." Below it was a photograph that made Emily's breath catch. A small girl with light brown hair and familiar eyes, clutching a golden butterfly pendant. That's you, Matthew said gently. 3-year-old Lily Harrison, daughter of William and Margaret Harrison. You were taken from your family's estate in Westchester during a ransom kidnapping that was orchestrated by someone with intimate knowledge of the family's security protocols. Emily stared at the photograph, searching for some spark of recognition, some memory that would make this feel real. But the little girl in the picture might as well have been a stranger. The investigation revealed that this wasn't a random crime, Matthew continued. Someone with access to the Harrison family's routines, their security schedules, their business dealings, someone close to them, planned this abduction. Who? Grace asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Matthew swiped to another document, this one showing corporate records and financial statements. Charles Donovan, William Harrison's business partner and former best friend. Their relationship went back to college, and they'd built the Harrison Hotel empire together from the ground up. What happened between them? Emily asked, though part of her dreaded the answer. Money, power, and betrayal. The usual suspects. Matthew's tone was grim. In 1993, William discovered that Charles had been embezzling funds from their company for years, using shell corporations and fake vendors to siphon millions of dollars. When William confronted him with evidence, Charles blamed the whole thing on a gambling addiction and begged for forgiveness. William forgave him. More than that, he covered up the theft, helped Charles pay back the money to avoid criminal charges, and even arranged for him to receive treatment for his gambling problem. But there was a condition. Charles had to sell his shares in the company and step away from the business permanently. Grace leaned forward, her face pale. So Charles lost everything. His fortune, his reputation, his position in society. Yes, but more importantly to a man like Charles, he lost his power. Matthew scrolled to police reports and FBI documents. The kidnapping happened 6 months after Charles was forced out of the company. The ransom demands weren't just about money. They were designed to destroy William psychologically. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. How do you mean? The kidnappers demanded that William publicly admit to embezzling company funds, essentially confessing to Charles's crimes. They wanted him to destroy his own reputation and business empire. When William refused and tried to involve the FBI instead, they claimed you had been killed and sent him. Evidence to support that claim. But I wasn't killed, Emily said, confused. No, you escaped. Matthew showed them another police report, this one from the same week. A convenience store owner 3 blocks from where Grace found you reported seeing 2 men with a small child around midnight. The men seemed agitated, arguing about what to do. Security footage from that night is long gone, but witness statements suggest there was some kind of struggle and the child ran off during the confusion. Emily's hand went instinctively to her throat, fingers finding the butterfly pendant. And Charles, where is he now? Matthew's expression darkened. That's where things get complicated. After the supposed death of Lily Harrison, Charles Donovan disappeared for several years when he resurfaced. He'd built a new identity and a new fortune, this time through less legitimate means. What kind of means? Grace asked. Money laundering, human trafficking, corporate extortion. Charles discovered he had a talent for criminal enterprise over the past 15 years. He's built a network that operates across 3 states. Officially, he runs a series of legitimate businesses. Unofficially, he's one of the most dangerous men on the East Coast. Emily felt the room spinning around her. And you think he's involved in what's happening now? The people asking questions about me. I know he is. Matthew pulled up a final document, a surveillance report dated just 2 days ago. My contacts in law enforcement have been tracking increased activity around Charles's operations, phone calls, Meetings, movement of personnel, all centered around someone they're calling the Harrison girl. "He knows I'm alive," Emily whispered. "He's known for a while, I think, but something recent triggered his interest. Probably your encounter with your father on the bus. Charles has people everywhere. It wouldn't have taken long for word to reach him that William Harrison was actively searching for someone again." Grace's voice was shaky when she spoke. "What does he want with her?" "Think about it from his perspective," Matthew said. "Emily is the only person who can potentially testify about what happened that night. She's living proof that Charles Donovan orchestrated the kidnapping of a child. Even if she doesn't remember now, memories can be recovered, evidence can be found. So he wants to kill me," Emily said flatly. "I think he wants to eliminate any threat to the empire he's built on the foundation of everyone believing Lily Harrison was dead." The diner fell silent, except for the distant sound of traffic and the coffee machine hissing behind the counter. Emily looked at Grace, seeing her own fear reflected in the older woman's eyes. "What am I supposed to do?" Emily asked. "I can't hide forever, and I can't put Grace in danger because of something I don't even remember. You don't have to face this alone," Matthew said firmly. "The Foundation works with law enforcement agencies across the country. We can arrange protection, help you recover memories safely, build a case against Charles that doesn't require you to be exposed. And William Harrison," Emily's voice was bitter. "Where does my supposed father fit into all this?" "That's your choice," Matthew said gently. "But Emily, whatever you decide about your relationship with him, you need to understand that he's been searching for you for 19 years because he loves you. Not because he wants to control you or use you, because losing you destroyed his world." Emily stood abruptly, pacing to the diner's front window. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the street, and she noticed a black sedan parked half a block away, the same one she'd seen outside their apartment building. "Matthew," she said quietly, "I think we're being watched." He joined her at the window, his expression immediately shifting to high alert. "We need to leave now, through the back exit." But as they gathered their things and headed toward the rear of the diner, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that running was exactly what Charles Donovan wanted them to do. And somewhere in the city, a man who claimed to be her father was probably wondering if he'd lost his daughter all over again. The safe house Matthew arranged was a modest apartment in a neighborhood 20 minutes from Emily's usual haunts. It belonged to a retired police detective who'd worked with the Missing Children Foundation for years, and it felt sterile in the way that temporary places always did. Functional furniture, generic artwork on the walls, nothing that suggested real people actually lived there. Grace sat on the beige couch, her medication spread out on the coffee table like a small pharmacy. The stress of the past few days had clearly taken its toll. Her complexion was gray, and her hands shook more than usual as she organized her pills. "I should have told you everything years ago," Grace said quietly, not looking up from her task. "Maybe if you'd known the truth from the beginning, you could have been prepared for this." Emily knelt beside the couch, helping Grace with the evening medications. "You were trying to protect me. I understand that now." "Do you?" Grace's eyes were bright with tears. "Because I keep thinking that maybe Charles is right. Maybe you would have been better off if I'd turned you over to the authorities that night. Maybe your real parents could have kept you safe." "My real parent is sitting right here," Emily said firmly. "DNA doesn't make someone a parent, Grace. Love does. Sacrifice does. 19 years of getting up at 5 a.m. to make breakfast before your double shift. That makes someone a parent." Grace squeezed Emily's hand, but her expression remained troubled. "There's more I need to tell you about that night. Things I've never said because I was ashamed of how selfish they were." Before Emily could respond, the apartment's landline rang. Matthew, who'd been making coffee in the kitchen, answered it quickly. His half of the conversation was tense and mostly monosyllabic. "We have a problem," he said, hanging up. That was Detective Rivera from the NYPD. 3 of Charles Donovan's known associates were spotted in your neighborhood this afternoon. They were asking questions at the laundromat below your apartment, showing your picture to the other tenants. Emily felt her stomach drop. "Are people in danger because of me?" Rivera's arranged for increased patrols in the area. But Emily, they also found something else. Charles's people left a message with Mrs. Chen upstairs from your apartment. They said to tell Emily Parker that old friends don't like being forgotten. Grace made a small, frightened sound. "He's playing with us. like a cat with a mouse. "There's something else," Matthew continued. "My contact at the foundation received a call this afternoon. Someone claiming to represent William Harrison's interests, offering to coordinate security efforts for your protection." "That doesn't sound like a bad thing," Emily said, confused by Matthew's worried expression. "It would be, except William Harrison didn't authorize any such call. When we contacted his office directly, his assistant confirmed that he's been in meetings all day and hasn't spoken to anyone about coordinating security." The implications hit Emily like a cold wave. Someone's impersonating people connected to William, which means Charles has deeper access to information about this situation than we thought. Matthew sat down across from them, his expression grave. "Emily, I think we need to seriously consider moving you somewhere much farther away, at least until law enforcement can build a case against Charles." "No." Emily's response was immediate and firm. "I'm not running across the country because some criminal thinks I'm a threat to him." "You are a threat to him," Matthew pointed out. "You're living proof that he kidnapped a child and let everyone believe she was dead for 19 years. But I don't remember anything that could hurt him legally. You said so yourself. Even recovered memories aren't reliable in court without corroborating evidence." "Charles doesn't know that," Grace said quietly. "And powerful men like him don't take chances with their freedom." As if summoned by their conversation, Emily's cell phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your grandmother looks tired. Cancer treatment is so expensive. It would be a shame if something happened to interrupt her care." Emily's hands shook as she showed the message to Matthew. "He's threatening Grace directly now." Before anyone could respond, the apartment's security system chimed, indicating someone was at the front door. Matthew immediately moved to the window, peering through the blinds with practiced caution. "It's William Harrison," he said, sounding surprised. "He's alone, and he looks terrible." Emily's first instinct was to tell Matthew not to let him in, but something about the description made her hesitate. "What do you mean, terrible? Like he hasn't slept in days, like he's been crying?" Matthew looked at her questioningly. "It's your call, Emily, but he might have information we need." Against her better judgment, Emily nodded. Matthew opened the door to reveal William Harrison looking nothing like the composed businessman she'd met at the church. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his usually perfect hair disheveled, and his eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion and grief. "Emily," he said, his voice breaking slightly, "thank God you're safe. When my security team told me about Charles's people in your neighborhood." "Your security team?" Matthew's voice was sharp. "We were told someone claiming to represent you had called about coordinating protection, but your office said you hadn't authorized it." William looked confused. "My head of security called me an hour ago with updates on the surveillance around Emily's apartment. I came here as soon as I heard about the threats." "Who's your head of security?" Emily asked, a terrible suspicion growing in her mind. "Marcus Webb. He's been with my company for 8 years, came highly recommended." William's voice trailed off as he saw the expression on Matthew's face. "Marcus Webb worked for Charles Donovan until 2018, Matthew said grimly. "He was arrested on charges of corporate espionage, but the case was dropped due to lack of evidence." The color drained from William's face. "You're saying Charles has someone inside my security operation?" "I'm saying Charles has been watching your every move." "Probably for years," Matthew replied. "He knew the moment you started actively searching for Emily again. He knew about our meeting today, about this safe house, about everything." As if to punctuate his words, Emily's phone buzzed again. "Safe houses only work if they're actually safe. Tell your father his security needs work." "We need to leave," Matthew said urgently, moving toward the bedroom to gather their belongings. "Now." But Grace was struggling to stand, her breathing labored and her complexion pale. "I can't," she gasped. "Something's wrong." Emily rushed to her side, immediately recognizing the signs of one of Grace's episodes: the stress, the interrupted medication schedule, the constant fear. It was all taking its toll on her already fragile health. "She needs her emergency medication," Emily said, rifling through Grace's pill organizer. "And probably a hospital." "There's no time," Matthew said from the window. "There are 2 cars pulling up outside. We need to move." "I'm not leaving without Grace," Emily said firmly. William stepped forward, his expression resolute despite the fear in his eyes. "Then we don't leave without her." He gently lifted Grace from the couch, supporting her weight with surprising strength. "My car is armored. We can get her to a hospital and figure out our next move from there." As they made their way toward the back exit of the apartment, Emily realized that regardless of her feelings about William Harrison as a father, right now he was the only one with resources that might keep Grace alive long enough to see tomorrow. And somewhere in the city, Charles Donovan was probably smiling, knowing that he'd successfully forced his old friend's daughter into a position where she had no choice but to trust the man she'd rejected just days before. The private hospital room William had arranged was a stark contrast to the county medical center, where Grace usually received her cancer treatments. Everything was pristine white and chrome, with equipment that hummed quietly and efficiently. Grace looked small and fragile against the expensive linens, but her color had improved dramatically after receiving proper medical attention. "The doctors say you're stable," Emily said softly, adjusting Grace's blanket. "But they want to keep you overnight for observation." Grace's weathered hand found Emily's. "I'm sorry, baby girl. I know this isn't what you wanted. Being here, accepting his help." Emily glanced toward the window where William stood with his back to them, speaking in low tones on his phone. Even from across the room, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his free hand clenched and unclenched at his side. "I don't know what I want anymore," Emily admitted. 3 days ago, my biggest worry was making enough money for your medication. Now I'm discovering that my entire life has been a lie. There's a criminal who wants me dead, and the man who claims to be my father is..." She paused, struggling with the words. "Is what?" Grace asked gently. "Is actually trying to protect us. Both of us. Even though I've been nothing but cruel to him." William ended his call and turned toward them, his face grave. "That was Matthew. The FBI has agreed to provide protection, but they need Emily to come in for debriefing tomorrow. They want to try some techniques to help recover suppressed memories from that night." "What if I don't remember anything useful?" Emily asked. "What if we go through all this and I'm still just a blank slate? Then we find another way to stop Charles," William said firmly. "But Emily, there's something else we need to discuss. Something I should have told you at the church." He pulled a chair close to Grace's bed and sat down, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "When you were taken, the kidnappers didn't just want money. They wanted to destroy everything I'd built, everything I cared about. The ransom demands included forcing me to publicly confess to embezzling funds from my own company, crimes that Charles had actually committed. Why didn't you just do it?" Emily asked. "If it meant getting me back. Because my lawyers advised me that once I made that confession, Charles would have legal grounds to reclaim his position in the company. They said the kidnappers would never actually return you, that they'd take the money and disappear, leaving me with nothing." Grace's grip on Emily's hand tightened. "So you chose the company over your daughter?" "No," William said, his voice breaking. "I chose what I thought was the best way to get her back alive. The FBI said cooperation with kidnappers rarely results in safe returns. They convinced me that a tactical response was the only way to save her. But the tactical response failed," Emily said quietly. "Catastrophically. When Charles realized I wasn't going to confess to his crimes, he ordered his people to..." William stopped, unable to continue. "To kill me," Emily finished. "But you escaped," Grace said, her voice filled with wonder. "A 3-year-old child outsmarted professional criminals." William looked at Grace for the first time since entering the room, really looked at her. "You saved her life, when my daughter needed someone most, when everyone else had failed her. You were there." Tears rolled down Grace's cheeks. "I almost didn't take her home that night. She was so scared, so dirty. I thought about calling the police, doing the right thing, but something about those men looking for her. They didn't seem like they wanted to help a lost child find her family." "You were right to trust your instincts," William said. "If you'd turned her over to authorities, Charles would have found a way to get to her. She never would have lived to see her 4th birthday." Emily stood abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the city. Below, traffic moved in orderly patterns, people going about their normal lives, unaware of the drama playing out in the hospital room above them. "Matthew showed me something today," she said without turning around. "Pictures of missing person flyers with my face on them. Rewards for information. Evidence that you never stopped looking." "Never," William confirmed. "Even after Margaret, Even after your mother took her own life because she couldn't handle the grief. I kept searching. I hired new investigators every few years, followed up on every tip, no matter how ridiculous it seemed. Emily finally turned to face him. There was a poster in the subway station 3 blocks from our apartment. I walked past it every day for 2 years on my way to community college. My own face, and I never recognized it. You were just a baby when you were taken, Grace said gently. And trauma changes how memories form, how recognition works. But part of me always felt like something was missing, Emily continued. Like there was this empty space where something important should be. I used to have these dreams about a woman with long dark hair who sang lullabies in a language I didn't understand. William's breath caught. Margaret spoke to you in French when you were little. She sang you French lullabies every night. The revelation hit Emily like a physical blow. She sank into the chair beside Grace's bed, her hands trembling. I remember the songs, not the words, but the melody. I used to hum them when I was scared. Do you remember anything else? William asked hopefully. The house, maybe, or your room. Emily closed her eyes, trying to reach back into the darkness of her earliest years. There was a garden, with roses and a swing set with yellow swings. She opened her eyes to find William staring at her with wonder. Is that real? Or am I making it up because I want it to be real? Margaret planted that rose garden the year you were born, William said, his voice thick with emotion. And the swing set was your 3rd birthday present. You loved those yellow swings. For a moment, the hospital room was silent, except for the quiet hum of medical equipment. Emily felt something shifting inside her, a wall she'd built around her heart starting to crack. I don't know how to do this, she said finally. I don't know how to be your daughter when I've spent 19 years being someone else. You don't have to be anyone other than who you are, William said. Emily Parker is exactly who you should be. Strong, loyal, protective of the people you love. Those are the qualities I would have wanted my daughter to develop. But I've been so angry at you, Emily said. So bitter about the life I thought I should have had. You had every right to be angry. I failed to protect you when you needed me most. Grace struggled to sit up straighter in her hospital bed. Both of you need to stop this, she said firmly. Emily, this man spent 19 years grieving for you, searching for you, hoping against hope that you were alive somewhere. William, this girl has been loved and cared for every single day since I found her. You both did the best you could with impossible circumstances. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Matthew entered, his expression tense. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation. Charles's people just grabbed Mrs. Chen from Emily's old building. They left a message that she'd be returned safely in exchange for a meeting with Emily. Absolutely not, William said immediately. It's obviously a trap. Of course it's a trap, Emily said, standing. But Mrs. Chen is 83 years old and completely innocent in all this. I can't let her get hurt because of me. Emily, no, Grace said desperately. Please don't do this. But Emily was already moving toward the door. Matthew, set up the meeting. But I'm not going alone. And I'm not going unarmed with information if Charles wants to see me. He's going to get more than he bargained for. The abandoned warehouse on the south side of the city looked like a monument to urban decay. Broken windows stared down like hollow eyes, and rust stains streaked the corrugated metal walls like tears. Emily sat in the passenger seat of William's armored sedan, watching the building through binoculars while FBI agents positioned themselves around the perimeter. Last chance to reconsider, Agent Rivera said through her earpiece. We can find another way to get Mrs. Chen back safely. No, we can't, Emily replied quietly. Charles isn't going to negotiate. He wants me, and he'll keep taking innocent people until he gets what he wants. William's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had gone white. I should never have let you talk me into this. I just got you back. I can't lose you again. You're not losing me, Emily said, though her voice betrayed her own fear. You're helping me finish something that started 19 years ago. The plan was simple in theory. Emily would enter the warehouse wearing a wire and with GPS tracking. FBI snipers were positioned on surrounding buildings, and tactical teams were ready to move in at the first sign of trouble. But Emily knew that no plan survived contact with someone as ruthless as Charles Donovan. Her phone buzzed with a text. Come alone to the main entrance. Any sign of law enforcement and the old woman dies first. He's watching us. Emily said, scanning the surrounding buildings. "He knows the FBI is here." "Then we abort," William said immediately. "No." Emily removed her earpiece and the GPS tracker from her jacket. "I go in alone, just like he wants. But you stay close. When I give the signal, you come in." "What signal?" Agent Rivera's voice crackled through the car's radio. Emily held up her butterfly pendant. "When Charles sees this, when I tell him what it really means, he's going to lose control. That's when you move in." Before anyone could stop her, Emily was out of the car and walking toward the warehouse. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her steps were steady. After 19 years of running from a past she couldn't remember, she was finally ready to face it. The main entrance was a heavy metal door that creaked ominously as it swung open. Inside, the warehouse was dimly lit by a few work lights hanging from the ceiling. The air smelled of rust, old concrete, and something else. Fear. "Emily Parker," a voice called from the shadows. Or should I say, Lily Harrison. A figure emerged from behind a stack of shipping containers. Charles Donovan was smaller than Emily had expected. Perhaps 60 years old, with silver hair and expensive clothes that seemed out of place in the grimy warehouse. But his eyes held a coldness that made her blood freeze. "Where's Mrs. Chen?" Emily demanded. "Safe for now." Charles gestured toward a chair in the center of the space. "Please, sit. We have so much to discuss." Emily remained standing. "I came here like you asked. Let her go." "Oh, my dear girl, you're hardly in a position to make demands." Charles smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Do you know how long I've been looking forward to this moment? 19 years of wondering if William's precious little butterfly was really dead. Why does it matter? I don't remember anything that could hurt you. Memories have a way of surfacing at inconvenient times," Charles said, circling her like a predator. "And you, my dear, are living proof of something I've spent 2 decades trying to bury. That you kidnapped a 3-year-old child. That I was willing to do whatever it took to destroy William Harrison." Charles's mask of civility began to slip. "He ruined my life, Emily. Took everything I'd worked for, everything I'd built, and threw it away because of some misplaced moral superiority." Emily's hand went instinctively to her pendant. "So you decided to ruin his life in return by taking his daughter." "I decided to teach him what real loss felt like." Charles's voice rose with old anger. "But you had to go and survive, didn't you? Had to escape from my people and disappear into the city like a little ghost." "Where's Mrs. Chen?" Emily repeated, her voice stronger now. Charles clapped his hands twice, and 2 men emerged from the shadows, dragging Grace between them. Emily's heart stopped. Not Mrs. Chen. Grace, pale and weak, her hospital gown visible beneath a thin jacket someone had thrown over her shoulders. "Grace," Emily started forward, but Charles raised a hand to stop her. "Your touching reunion at the hospital was quite moving," Charles said with mock sympathy. "An old woman who dedicated her life to protecting William Harrison's lost daughter. How poetic." "You took her from the hospital." Emily's voice shook with rage. "She's sick. She needs her medication. She needs to answer some questions first." Charles nodded to his men, who forced Grace into a chair. "Like how she managed to find you that night when my professionals couldn't. Like what she's told you over the years about where you came from." Grace raised her head with effort, her eyes finding Emily's across the warehouse. "I told her the truth," she said, her voice weak but defiant. "That someone loved her enough to search for her every day for 19 years. Charles backhanded Grace across the face, the sound echoing through the empty space. Emily screamed and lunged forward, but more men appeared from the shadows, grabbing her arms and holding her back. "Don't touch her." Emily fought against their grip. "Your fight is with me, not with her. My fight is with everyone who stood between me and my revenge." Charles snarled. "Do you want to know what really happened that night, little Lily? Do you want to know why you have nightmares about men in dark clothes chasing you through empty streets?" Emily forced herself to stop struggling, to focus on Charles's face. "Tell me, my men were supposed to kill you quickly, painlessly, a bullet to the head, make it look like a gang shooting. William would have gotten his daughter's body back, and I would have had my ultimate revenge." Charles's smile was cruel. "But you were clever, weren't you? You heard them talking. And when they stopped the car to switch drivers, you ran." The memory hit Emily like a physical blow. Running through dark streets, her small legs carrying her as fast as they could while footsteps pounded behind her, the taste of fear in her mouth, the sound of her own terrified breathing. "I remember," she whispered. "I remember running. For 6 blocks," Charles continued, enjoying her pain. "My men chased you for 6 blocks before you disappeared into that maze of apartments and alleyways. By the time they organized a proper search, you'd vanished completely." Grace was crying now, tears streaming down her bruised cheek. "She was just a baby," she said. "How could you hunt a 3-year-old child like an animal?" "Because that 3-year-old child represented the failure of my perfect plan," Charles replied. "And now, 19 years later, she represents a threat to everything I've built since then." Emily looked at Grace, then at Charles, then at the men holding her arms. "You're right about one thing," she said quietly. "I am a threat to you." "Not for much longer," Charles said, pulling a gun from his jacket. Emily smiled, her hand closing around the butterfly pendant. "You want to know what this really represents, Charles? It's not just a piece of jewelry my father had made for his daughter's birthday." Charles frowned, clearly not expecting this response. "It's a GPS tracker," Emily continued. "Has been for the past 2 hours, since William had it modified at the hospital. And every word you've just said has been transmitted to FBI agents who are surrounding this building." Charles's face went white with rage. "You're lying!" "Grace!" Emily called out, her voice carrying clearly through the warehouse. "Remember what you always told me about butterflies?" Grace managed a weak smile through her pain. "That they represent transformation," she said. "That beautiful things can emerge from the hardest times." The warehouse doors exploded inward as FBI tactical teams poured through every entrance simultaneously. The warehouse erupted into chaos as FBI agents flooded through the entrances, their tactical lights cutting through the shadows like white-hot knives. Emily heard Agent Rivera's voice booming through a megaphone. "Federal agents, drop your weapons and get down on the ground." Charles's men scattered in different directions, but Charles himself remained frozen in place, his gun still pointed at Emily. His face had gone from pale to flushed red with rage, spittle forming at the corners of his mouth. "You think you're so clever," he snarled, his finger tightening on the trigger. "But I'm not going to prison because of William Harrison's brat." "Let her go, Charles." William's voice cut through the warehouse as he appeared behind one of the FBI teams, ignoring Agent Rivera's shouts for him to stay back. "Your fight is with me, not with her. My fight is with everyone you ever cared about," Charles screamed, swinging the gun toward Grace, who sat helpless in the chair 20 feet away. "Starting with the woman who stole my perfect revenge." Emily saw the intention in his eyes, a split second before he pulled the trigger. Without thinking, she threw her full weight against the man holding her right arm, breaking free just as the gun fired. She dove toward Grace, but she was too far away, moving too slowly. Grace, despite her frailty and weakness, somehow found the strength to push herself out of the chair. She stumbled forward, intercepting the bullet that had been meant for Emily's heart. The impact sent her crashing to the concrete floor, blood spreading rapidly across her hospital gown. "Grace!" Emily's scream tore through the warehouse as she skidded to her knees beside the fallen woman. Grace's eyes were wide with shock, her breathing shallow and rapid. "Baby girl," Grace whispered, her voice barely audible over the chaos around them. Blood frothed at the corners of her mouth. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine, Grace, I'm fine. You're going to be fine too." Emily pressed her hands against the wound in Grace's chest, trying desperately to stem the bleeding. "Medic, we need a medic." FBI agents had surrounded Charles, who was screaming incoherently about justice and revenge while they forced him to the ground. But Emily could only focus on the woman who had raised her, who was now dying in her arms because of choices made 19 years ago. "Listen to me," Grace said, her grip on Emily's hand surprisingly strong despite everything. "There's something I need you to know, something I should have told you years ago. Save your strength," Emily said, tears streaming down her face. "The paramedics are coming. You're going to be okay." "No, honey, we both know I'm not." Grace's voice was growing weaker, but her eyes remained focused on Emily's face. "Your father, William, he never stopped looking for you. Not for one day in 19 years. I know that now," Emily said. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," Grace coughed. specks of blood staining her lips. "I saw the posters, Emily. Every week for years. New posters with your picture. Bigger and bigger rewards. I saw the private investigators canvassing the neighborhood, asking questions." Emily felt her heart breaking. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you let him find me?" "Because I was selfish," Grace whispered, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Because I loved you so much. And I was terrified of losing the only good thing that had ever happened in my lonely old life." William appeared at Emily's shoulder, dropping to his knees beside them. His expensive suit was torn and dirty, his face streaked with tears. "Grace, you saved her life. Twice. Once 19 years ago, and again today." Grace's eyes found William's face, and for a moment, some of her old strength returned. "She's a good girl," she said firmly. "Strong and kind and loyal. Everything a parent could want in a daughter." "I know," William said, his voice breaking. "And she learned those qualities from you. Take care of her," Grace continued, her grip on Emily's hand beginning to loosen. "She's going to need time to figure out who she is now. Don't rush her. Don't try to make her into someone she's not." "I promise," William said. Grace turned her attention back to Emily, using the last of her strength to lift her free hand to Emily's cheek. "I need you to forgive him, baby girl. Your father blamed himself for what happened to you, but it wasn't his fault. Charles was evil, and evil people do evil things regardless of how much good people try to stop them. Grace, please don't leave me," Emily sobbed. "I can't do this without you." "You can do anything," Grace said with absolute certainty. "You survived being kidnapped at 3 years old. You escaped from professional criminals. You built a life from nothing and took care of a sick old woman for months without complaining once. You're stronger than you know." The paramedics arrived, pushing Emily and William aside as they worked frantically to stabilize Grace. Emily watched helplessly as they inserted IV lines, administered medications, and radioed the hospital with vitals that sounded increasingly desperate. "We need to transport now," one of the paramedics said, looking grim. "She's lost too much blood," as they loaded Grace onto a stretcher. She managed to grab Emily's hand one more time. "The pendant," she whispered urgently. "It was never about the gold or the craftsmanship. It was about a father's love for his daughter, a love so strong it could survive 19 years of separation." "I understand," Emily said, clutching Grace's hand as they wheeled her toward the ambulance. "And, Emily," Grace's voice was barely a breath now, "your mother, Margaret. She would be so proud of the woman you've become. So very proud." Those were Grace's last words. She closed her eyes in the ambulance and never opened them again. Despite the paramedics' best efforts, Emily held her hand as the monitors flatlined, as the paramedics finally stopped their frantic work and looked at her with expressions of profound sympathy. "Time of death, 11:47 p.m., one of them said quietly. Emily sat in the back of the ambulance, staring at Grace's peaceful face, feeling like her world had ended. William climbed in beside her, not saying anything, just being present in the way that sometimes meant more than words. "She saved my life twice," Emily said finally, her voice hollow with grief. "She loved you," William replied simply, "the way a parent loves a child, completely, unconditionally, willing to sacrifice anything to keep them safe." "I know," Emily looked up at him, seeing her own grief reflected in his eyes. "And I know you loved me that way too. All these years, even when you didn't know if I was alive or dead, you kept loving me." William nodded, not trusting his voice. "I'm sorry," Emily continued, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry for being so angry at you, for blaming you for things that weren't your fault. Grace was right. Charles was evil, and you did everything you could to save me. You don't have to apologize," William said, reaching for her hand. "You had every right to be angry. I should have found you sooner. You found me when I was ready to be found," Emily said, squeezing his hand. "And Grace made sure I was worth finding." Outside the ambulance, Agent Rivera was coordinating the arrest of Charles's remaining associates. Charles himself was being loaded into a different ambulance, having been wounded during his capture. But Emily couldn't bring herself to care about his fate. All she could think about was the woman who had loved her enough to die for her, and the father who had loved her enough to never stop searching. Dad. The word felt strange on her lips, but also somehow right. William's eyes filled with tears. Yes, I'd like to go home with you. Not forever. Not until I figure everything out. But for tonight, I don't want to be alone. Neither do I, William said, pulling her into his arms as the ambulance doors closed on the most devastating and redemptive night of their lives. 6 months later, Emily opened her eyes in the private recovery room at Metropolitan General Hospital, the same hospital where Grace had spent her final days. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, casting golden rectangles across the polished floor. Her shoulder ached where the surgeon had repaired the damage from a bullet that had grazed her during the warehouse confrontation, an injury she'd barely noticed at the time, too focused on Grace's condition to register her own pain. "You're awake," William said softly from the chair beside her bed. His hair was more silver than she remembered, and new lines had appeared around his eyes, but his smile was warm and genuine. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been asleep for months," Emily replied, her voice hoarse from the anesthesia. The surgery had been minor, removing scar tissue that had been causing chronic pain, but the recovery had given her time to think, to process everything that had happened since that night on the bus. "You have been, in a way," William said, reaching for her hand. "Dr. Martinez says the procedure went perfectly. No more pain, no lasting damage." Emily squeezed his fingers, marveling at how natural the gesture had become. "Have you been here all night?" "Every night this week," William admitted. "I know it's probably too much, but I can't help worrying. I've already lost 19 years with you. I don't want to miss anything else." "It's not too much," Emily said, and meant it. The relationship they'd built over the past months had been careful, tentative, but genuine. William had kept his promise to Grace, never pushing Emily to be someone she wasn't, never trying to erase the woman who had raised her from her heart or memory. A soft knock interrupted them, and Matthew Collins appeared in the doorway holding a bouquet of yellow roses. Grace's favorite flowers, his relationship with Emily had deepened naturally over the months, built on shared understanding and mutual respect rather than dramatic declarations. "These are from everyone at the foundation," Matthew said, arranging the flowers in a vase on the windowsill. "And this is from me." He handed her a small wrapped package. Inside was a silver locket engraved with a butterfly design. Emily opened it to find 2 pictures, one of Grace holding a young Emily, and one of William and Margaret with 3-year-old Lily. "Past and present," Matthew said simply. "Both parts of who you are." Emily felt tears prick her eyes. "It's perfect." William cleared his throat. "Speaking of the foundation, Matthew has some news to share." Matthew's face lit up with excitement. The Lily Margaret Foundation for Missing Children officially received its nonprofit status yesterday. "We have funding for 3 full-time investigators, a 24-hour hotline, and partnerships with law enforcement agencies in 12 states. Emily had insisted on naming the foundation after both her identities. Lily, the child who had been lost, and Margaret, the mother whose grief had inspired a father's endless search. It felt like the right way to honor all the people who had shaped her story. "How many families are we working with so far?" Emily asked. 47 active cases, Matthew replied, "and we've already had 2 successful reunions, the Rodriguez family in Texas and the Williamson case in Ohio." "Grace would be so proud," Emily said, touching the butterfly pendant that still hung around her neck. She wore it every day now, not as a mystery from her past, but as a bridge between who she had been and who she was becoming. "She would be proud of you," William said firmly, "of everything you've built, everything you've accomplished." The door opened again, and Dr. Martinez entered with Emily's discharge papers. "Everything looks excellent," she said with a professional smile. "You're cleared for normal activity, though I'd avoid any more warehouse confrontations for a while." Emily laughed, something that had come more easily in recent months. "I'll do my best. There's someone here to see you," Dr. Martinez continued. "Says she's family." Emily and William exchanged confused glances. As far as they knew, all their family was already in the room. But when the door opened wider, a young woman about Emily's age stepped inside, clutching a manila folder and looking nervous. "Emily, my name is Sarah Chen. I'm Mrs. Chen's granddaughter. The woman who Charles's people grabbed that night at the warehouse. Emily sat up straighter, immediately concerned. Is your grandmother okay? I've been meaning to visit her. She's fine, Sarah said quickly. Physically anyway. But she's been carrying something that she says belongs to you. Something she's had for 19 years. Sarah opened the folder and pulled out a small stuffed rabbit. Worn and faded, but clearly well-loved. Emily's breath caught as memories flooded back. Not the traumatic memories of that terrible night, but earlier ones. Happy ones. Bunny, she whispered, the word coming from somewhere deep in her childhood. His name was Bunny. Grandmother found him in the alley behind your old apartment building the morning after she found you, Sarah explained. She kept him all these years, hoping someday she'd know who he belonged to. When she saw the news reports about what happened in the warehouse, she recognized your face. Emily reached for the stuffed rabbit with trembling hands. The moment she touched the soft fur, more memories surfaced. Being tucked into bed with Bunny beside her, carrying him to the garden to show him the roses, Margaret singing French lullabies while Emily and Bunny listened. I remember, she said wonderingly. I remember being happy. William's eyes filled with tears. Margaret bought him for you when you were 18 months old. You wouldn't go anywhere without him. Mrs. Chen wanted me to tell you something else, Sarah continued. She said to thank you for being brave that night. She said not many people would risk their lives for a stranger, but she's not surprised that Grace Parker's granddaughter would. After Sarah left, Emily sat quietly holding Bunny, while William and Matthew gave her space to process this new connection to her earliest memories. The butterfly pendant caught the afternoon light, and Emily realized that Grace had been right all along. Transformation wasn't about forgetting where you came from, but about integrating all the pieces of yourself into something new and beautiful. I want to show you something, she said suddenly, reaching for her phone. She scrolled through photos until she found the one she was looking for, a picture from the Foundation's first successful reunion, the Rodriguez family embracing their son who had been missing for 6 years. This is why Grace died, Emily said, not because of Charles's revenge or old crimes, but because she understood that families belong together. Every family we reunite, every child we bring home, that's Grace's legacy. And yours, Matthew added gently. Emily looked around the hospital room, at William, who had never stopped loving her, at Matthew, who had helped her find purpose in her pain, at the yellow roses that reminded her of Grace's endless optimism, at the butterfly pendant that had brought her home. You know what I realized, she said. I spent so long thinking I had to choose between being Lily or being Emily, but I'm both. I'm the child who was loved by Margaret and William, and I'm the woman who was raised by Grace. I'm the girl who escaped from kidnappers, and I'm the person who's going to make sure other families don't go through what we went through. William stood and moved to the window, looking out at the city where his daughter had been lost and found again. Your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become, he said. Both your mothers. I know, Emily said, clutching Bunny to her chest while her other hand found the butterfly pendant. And I think I'm ready to go home now. Really home. Where's that? Matthew asked. Emily smiled, looking at the two men who had become her family, thinking of Grace's love that would always be part of her, remembering Margaret's lullabies that had followed her through the darkness. Wherever the people who love me are, she said. That's home. Outside the window, a butterfly landed on the glass for just a moment before spreading its wings and flying toward the sun,